Welcome to today's Corporate Venturing Insider series. Today, I am excited to have Galina with us. She's from HL Ventures. Galina, welcome.
Thanks so much for having me, Nicolas. Nice to be here.
Thank you. And today is going to be a very special treat for you because Galina can share about the platform team and the special mission of the platform in venture capital. So maybe starting with your journey, Galina, can you share how you got into HL Ventures from wherever you think is the right beginning?
Yeah, let me think about the starting point. I'll start from the beginning. My first job in venture capital and in the venture industry and ecosystem in general was with Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator here in New York City, and that was year 2011 or 2012. So this was quite a while back, especially in venture years. They're like dog years. And that was a job that really got me started in the ecosystem. That was a job where I learned a lot of the investing chops, diligence chops, community chops, platform chops. Everything came and started really with that job, which I was very, very lucky to have. I was a new arrival in New York. I was an immigrant. Very, very new to the city, very new to the ecosystem, and both through a lot of hustle and networking and interest and curiosity, I landed this job that essentially opened up my aperture into the world of venture. So that was my start. I moved on to be the GM at Grand Central Tech, which is now known better as Company Ventures here in New York, collaborating both with seed stage and later stage companies on accelerating their businesses as well as building community for that organization. Spent a little bit of time consulting with 500 startups, with the World Bank, the Innovation Fund of Serbia, and came back to New York City in 2020 to really find my new home. And so HL Ventures, which has been my home for the past 4+ years, is a fund that invests at the nexus of impact, diversity, and growth. We invest in companies as early as pre-seed, really idea stage, and going all the way up to Series A, B. The only reason why I am at HL Ventures today is because of that long journey that started a while back with ERA and all of those other endeavors. They fired up my, they put the fire in my belly. Those experiences gave me so much interest and excitement about collaborating with early stage entrepreneurs, and that is what ultimately brought me to HL and its mission of supporting diverse founders and impactful ventures.
Very nice. 2011 is when you started. That was even before the term unicorn was defined. Um, what do you remember from your first steps into venture capital and things that maybe you believed was venture capital that you realized was different?
Yeah, New York City in 2011, 2012 was such a unique place to be. I have to acknowledge that it's not just venture capital in 2011, 2012, but it wasn't just the time, it was the place, right? New York
Mm.
City is a magnet to very smart people, very diverse perspectives. And so, that was the time when New York City and the country as a whole were in recovery mode after the market crash, but people were kind of coming out of the woodwork wanting to collaborate and looking to create companies, looking to co-create with others. It was a unique time when collaboration and community in New York City were kind of the words of the day. And so what I came across was really this interesting community of interesting people who were looking for ways to either start a business, fund a business, support a business, advise on a business, I was going to so many meetups. I was going to a lot of talks and pitch events. Those were really, really big back in the day, and they still are in New York City, but we need to acknowledge that that started a while back. And
Mm.
I was fascinated with what was going on in New York City and the uniqueness of its community and the helpfulness of its community, kind of the open book mentality of its community was what shaped me as a professional and ultimately was what excited and still excites a lot of people who come here. It was the friendliness, the paying it forward,
Yep.
the sort of, let's collaborate, let's talk about this, let's start as an event series. I was unfamiliar with that mentality coming from Eastern Europe and having grown up in a completely different culture. And I was completely blown away by it. I wanted to be part of it, no matter what.
I think New York is very special. I think 2011 is when I started reading the Fred Wilson, avc.com. He was posting a lot about venture capital, about New York. Fred Wilson is the one from Union Square, an amazing VC firm, amazing performance, early stage investment. So I got a sense of how New York was special, very, very diverse, but also the opportunity for having so many verticals in one place, which is actually quite different from Silicon Valley. New York has this opportunity to work with so many other verticals and industrials, which I think creates a very, very special ecosystem. Now, you mentioned immigrant. I'm also an immigrant, but I think New York is a city of immigrants. So maybe you could share how that is shaping your view in terms of helping entrepreneurs, because many entrepreneurs are also immigrants.
What a great question. I traveled the world quite a bit before I landed in New York. In fact, I had to sort of leave my communities twice, more than once, so to speak. I left my family behind, a lot of the friends I grew up with, went to college with, and then people I had made friends with elsewhere, and everything was just it's very bittersweet when you're leaving one place and moving
Mm,
to another. And so what I realized was that uh, community is hyper important. It's who you surround yourself with that builds your character, that builds your support system, that brings you opportunities. And it's then how you communicate your needs and your wants to your community of choice, to your family of choice, so to speak, is what ultimately potentially has the power to shape your career as well, not just
mm,
your personal life. And so what I have been building since the time that I touched base here in New York is that community of people. It's smart people from different backgrounds. You're absolutely right. New York City attracts and is open to a variety of businesses because there's so many different backgrounds here.
mm,
Um, and so that very mentality of wanting to rebuild sort of on the rubble of my previous places where I lived and rebuild a community of supportive networks is the same thing that I think shapes my perspective and my approach to supporting entrepreneurs in my work that I do. Because entrepreneurs, much like people who are new to the city or this country, need their tribe, right? They need their investors, they need their advisors, their mentors, their friends in the ecosystem, their peers, other founders that they can share things with. And so building that community in a smart way, building a network of resources, in fact, making sure that you're over resourced, that you're putting in more effort in surrounding yourself with the right advice and the right insight is what can make you as an entrepreneur and can make your business. So I use that same approach. I prefer to be over resourced. I prefer to ask people at every networking event, what is it that you do? What fires you up? What keeps you up at night about your business? How can I be helpful to you? Here's what I'm looking for. And so I try to instill that same mentality into everyone that I talk to in the industry as well. If I'm mentoring someone who's an up and comer in platform, that is what platform is all about. This is how you help entrepreneurs. You become so over resourced and so focused on getting the right people in your network, getting the right opportunities into your network, that you can just pick and choose at the time of opportunity and need what to go after. And that's how you also serve the community of entrepreneurs that you work with.
So I think what comes across is not just passion for your job, but true empathy for the entrepreneurs. And I do like the concept of needing your tribe, people who can help you out. And I also want to double click on the over resourced. I think that that's
Mhm.
actually the first time I hear this concept, but I think it's probably how you are designing your platform today. So maybe can you share some examples of where you are over resourcing, where maybe other
Mhm.
venture capital firms would not?
That's a great question. You know, originally when I came to HL Ventures, we already were quite networked in the community. We know quite a few people, but building a structured approach to platform was very important to us because HL Ventures leads with platform. We lead with value add. We lead with active engagement with our portfolio companies. That's one of our pillars. Um, and so when I looked at our rich network of opportunity, I said, okay, well, that's great. We can just put a lot of structure around this and make sure that we know every single resource that we serve to our companies very well. So, for example, if we're talking about sort of the table stakes of things, cloud credits are very important to every portfolio company in our community. Um, so cloud credits, but we also want to know who the point person is in that organization. We want to be able to appeal to someone directly. I want to be able to tell my founders that, the coach that they're speaking with is focused on X, Y, and Z, that they specialize in this specific area that is very important to them. So when I say over resourced, I don't just mean build a collection of logos of companies that can be helpful. I mean, build a knowledge base and build knowledge around who is most helpful at what times to which company. And I think organization and sort of like building architecture around your network and almost like building exactly that. You're building a house, right? And having the right architecture in place, when it meets empathy, that's when you get great platform service for entrepreneurs. And by the way, um, I believe that every platform team should be over resourced for every entrepreneur that they have. I think, for diverse entrepreneurs specifically, they are often under resourced because of the backgrounds that they have, because they're not always accepted. But I think every entrepreneur, when they're going through a journey, which is so complex, as they're building a company, should be over resourced, whether they are building it for themselves or they have teams of investors and mentors and advisors who can do that for them.
I like the way you match the indeed under resourced entrepreneurs with being over resourced on the platform side and the VC side. I also take away that you need to be proactive, but preempting the needs of the entrepreneurs, especially if they are common between many of those you support. And I like the analogy you're giving about building a house, which is really about architecturing around your network by finding what is needed at the right time for the entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. And, it takes a little bit of obviously knowledge and repetition to understand what those patterns might be. Um, that is why I think the longer someone stays in the platform role, so long as they're supported by their by their leadership and general partnership, and their journey and their strategies is supported in the firm, the longer they stay, the more institutional knowledge they get to build over time. And so that pattern recognition of when an entrepreneur might need this resource or that introduction starts becoming more natural. It almost becomes part of your MO, when you know when to dole out those resources and when to reach out proactively, when to not underestimate something someone says as just a phrase, but actually catch something that could be something your coach should be talking to them about. So it's building knowledge, and it's building expertise around it, right? So it's not just a mindless matching game. It's very much a profession. It's something that I want to encourage more people to pursue in venture.
I actually want to double click on that. You mentioned the longer you stay in the platform, the more helpful, the more prepared. I think there is a maybe something to share about the professionalization of a platform team. And this is a real career growth. Many in the audience are interested in corporate venturing, maybe because of the investment side. Can you make the case why they should get excited for the platform side, and why it's not actually boring, but actually it's really, really exciting?
That's my favorite question, Nicola. Thank you for asking it. I think, listen, I think the case for the professionalization of platform is absolutely there. We know that platform, as in post-investment support for portfolio companies, is absolutely needed and requested by entrepreneurs whenever they're in the diligence process. It's very often that entrepreneurs, when they sit across from an investor, they will ask, great, you deploy checks, amazing. What else? And this happens more and more often across the industry. And yes, there are situations when founders say, I'm just raising, I want to check. That's totally fine. That's what venture capital is for. But more often than not, there's something else. And it's become more common for venture capitalists, for GPs of funds to reach out in the community and say, I'm hiring a head of platform, a head of network, a VP of whatever the title is. And there's a variety of titles that cover platform, from marketing to investor relations. Oftentimes, I will admit to you, and it's a frustrating topic for all of us in platform, and there's thousands of us at this point across this function, that sometimes leadership is not quite sure what the strategy is behind it. They just know that platform is table stakes. They know that they must have someone in that seat, but what that strategy is, they're either unclear on, or they sort of want to dump everything that's non-investment into the platform person's lap. And so what happens in that case is that the person in the position, when there's no strategy, or they're not given a very clear KPI, or nobody really understands what's going on, sometimes will spend a lot of time spinning their wheels trying to understand what it is that's needed. Or before they even put any architecture in place, they try to figure out what's going on underneath, and is there a foundation for this role at all? And by the time that they've done diagnosing this, it may so happen that 2 years will have passed, and they've all of this time they've not been really adding true value, or they've been looking in a completely different place, whereas they should have, if they just had a little bit of support or strategy to begin with, it would have never happened. They might have been more successful. And so what I'm driving towards here is that when there's strategy behind the platform role in a venture firm, it builds towards a very natural career progression. Because when you know what your KPIs are, and admittedly, platform is less quantifiable KPI wise than, for example, a traditional investments role. But if there's support from the general partnership, and if there's a strategy in place, there's a very clear path towards letting that person stay in that role for a long time and deliver true value. Um, and professionalization happens when you have a lot of people staying in that role, passing on the knowledge, passing down the wisdom, ensuring that actually knowledge is institutionalized across the firm, that not a single, what often happens is that somebody leaves a platform role after 2 to 3 years, goes to another firm, a new person joins, and we start from day zero again.
Mm.
And I would really like more firms in the ecosystem to avoid that mistake. I would really love for there to be a more professionalized approach to this track in VC. And I guess that's not a very inspiring way of saying, "Hey, you should join platforms. Everything is so difficult." It's not actually. It's a really, really fun job, and currently there's sort of different distinctions, different variations of the platform role. There's more professionalized tracks such as marketing, communications, PR. So anything related to messaging and brand. There is investor relations, fund administration. There's talent, people operations. So for anyone who's looking and out of your audience that is looking to switch over to VC, all of these categories hire from more traditional marketing roles. They hire from traditional recruitment and people culture roles. They hire from finance, accounting, and law. So those are amazing tracks to pursue. But if I could leave your audience with one piece of advice around all of that, is look for a team in the investment world. Look for a team that has a strategy for platform within their organization. So there needs to be support for this role to be successful. Whether you're doing something very specialized like marketing or PR, or you're doing something a little bit broader, like what I do at HL Ventures, which is platform as a whole, holistically encompassing many functions.
I think that's a very good tip, which is you need to have clear intention and lasting intention to make the platform team a success and something that really will add value over time. And I guess it leads to one of my questions. I think it comes across from your answer, but there's an implied patience needed when starting a platform. It's not going to pay off so quickly. You may have some low-hanging fruits, but there's a patience needed to build a platform, to bring the benefits, to get the feedback loop coming. What would be your advice now to the firm who doesn't have yet a platform to think about how to get the first person into the platform team, the level of patience needed, the level of support needed, the level of networking required?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think patience is a virtue in any business, especially platform. I would recommend that a lot of time is spent with that first candidate on identifying what are some of the gaps that come up repeatedly in the firm in conversations with entrepreneurs. Having this first person in that role is so critical and gives them a chance to essentially interview the portfolio, no matter how small or large it is, and understand and be the ear to the ground and be the voice of the portfolio, translating some of the needs to the fund's management. Sometimes GPs don't have the time to listen. They have the time to listen from the board seat perspective. They have the time to listen when a call comes at 11 p.m. But oftentimes, those are critical things that they need to hear from the entrepreneur, and they kind of go about their day. They make a couple of introductions, they do their board service. But having that continuous feedback loop through that function, the platform function, is critical. So, arming that person with, patient responses, giving them access to the portfolio, giving them a chance to really scan the network and understand what are the fund's core strengths? Where do we continuously deliver value to our portfolio? Where do our portfolio companies praise us the most? Could we double down on that? Could we create even more value? Is there, quote unquote, is there a moat around it? Is there something defensible around it? Because something that oftentimes something that people in venture don't think about very often is that once a portfolio company has, it's not their first round of financing, they have 3, 4 firms on the cap table. What you don't want to see, you don't want to have is sort of this repetitive action from platform professionals across the cap table, right? Asking the same questions, delivering the same repetitive sort of value. You want to have something unique in your
Yeah.
platform offering that distinguishes you from everyone else and maybe puts you in front of your entrepreneurs more often, if that's something that you truly want. If, again, writing a check and an occasional check-in with your entrepreneurs is okay, then that's never a problem. But I think the professionalization piece of platform also has a lot to do with this need to become a little bit more distinct from everyone else and differentiate yourself
Yeah.
for your entrepreneurs, for your portfolio, as well as for your LPs, by the way, so that they understand how you deliver value as a firm.
I've heard two golden nuggets. One is to give access to the portfolio and allow for interviewing the portfolio, making sure to understand the gaps. But what I like is it's not just that you're unique by having a platform, it's how the platform is unique in itself compared to other platforms, which of course should help make a strong case that you're not just bringing capital, you're bringing the differentiated value. And if you can, and I think your point is you can articulate this well to entrepreneurs, that's going to be more valued, but it's also valued at the limited partners in how the firm is going to get uh, across the line with some entrepreneurs to be able to invest.
Absolutely, 100%. And it's quite difficult to explain to entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs are so busy all day long. And so being able to articulate what it is that you can bring to them right off the bat is a win.
So let's talk about that, because how do you start communicating before an investment is made? And then my second question afterwards will be, how do you onboard them once the investment is made? So if we start with, how do you start communicating even before the investment is made?
Well, that's a great question, and it kind of plays well into what HL does actually, Nicolas, because HL Ventures has a pretty unique piece in our diligence process called the wish list call. I've never seen
Ah,
that piece in the diligence process anywhere else, at least not in my previous roles. And when I was joining HL Ventures and listening a little bit and learning a little bit about the process, I was fascinated with the concept of the wish list call, because the wish list call incorporates both senior leadership and platform on that call with the entrepreneurs, and we essentially flip the script of the entire VC diligence process, and we ask the entrepreneurs to tell us what it is that they're looking for in terms of value add, what immediate wins they're looking to get, what long-term goals they have, what kind of introductions would be beneficial to them in the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, whatever that they can come up with. And then we map that against our own resources, our own capabilities, really trying to build as early as possible our understanding of how big of an engagement that's going to be, what kind of pieces of our network we could activate, so that the platform team can start thinking about value add way before we've made that investment decision. I find that process to be so unique to us and so helpful to entrepreneurs. We consistently hear as feedback that it's nothing that they've done before, and they appreciate it because, one, they get to communicate to us in a more perhaps real way what it is that keeps them up at night. And
Yeah.
two, they get in a structured way to think through things that are top of mind for them and organize their thoughts.
I
So,
I love it.
yeah.
I love it. Actually, thank you for sharing because maybe other people will want to copy now, but this is really nice.
It's on our website. We're not necessarily gatekeeping this information, but I find that it's a very good way to get platform involved early before investment, and then post investment. Uh, you know, my thinking is there, of course, needs to be a good approach to onboarding a company, understanding, what the next 30 days look like, how you're going to be delivering on the value that you've just promised to deliver on. And I think that's a good start for platform. And again, I will drive this point across. It's only possible if platform is allowed to be part of that longer investment process and diligence. And if you're siloed away from that entire thing, what happens
Mm.
is a portfolio company is dropped into your lap post investment, you know nothing about it, and you're sort of starting from scratch, which doesn't make a ton of sense because the rest of the investments team is, of course, fully prepared and knows what's happening and been in the data room and all of that jazz. Whereas
Mm.
platform is sort of completely in the dark until the very last moment. And neither is it fair nor is it strategic to organize
Yeah.
that process that way.
I think you're making a very strong point, which is investment team, platform team. It would hurt the firm, it would hurt the entrepreneurs to be siloed and to be engaged very early on, even before the investment, at the time of charming the entrepreneurs, preparing them for what happens next, is critical. Now, there is one word you use which I think is worth double clicking. I think it comes with practice and experience, which is expectation setting. How do you set the
Mhm.
right expectations so that you don't disappoint later, but at the same time, you really set the right expectations on how you can help?
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, I prefer to map our network very diligently ahead of time. We have a process around this when we essentially know what it is we're promising. We can't promise that we're going to make an introduction and it's going to turn into a contract,
Mm.
right? So I think expectation setting around results is really important. However, if we are participants in the act of strategy and tactics and we are involved as we promise to be and offer ourselves up to be, then there are higher chances of these introductions turning into something real. I will say that HL has a very, very unique perspective and approach to working with our entrepreneurs in the portfolio. We have a standing call every week. We have multiple workflows coming out of each call that we hold. We have a very, very strong system of record about everything, recording everything that goes on in these interactions, ensuring that we're actually doing the work that we promised to do. So there's a system behind us that's helping us move things along. Um, but we're also realistic about not everything working out when introductions are made. What we
Mm.
can do, however, is ensure that we are looped into those processes, that we help follow up, that we teach our entrepreneurs when they need that help in teaching them how to write a great forwardable email, for example. There's an art to that.
Yeah.
How to ensure that you follow up. What is the cadence on following up? How do you respond to a no, or how do you respond to a not now? All of these things we're able to teach, and they're essentially playbooks on our team. And so while we can't guarantee a positive outcome every time, what we can guarantee is that we will do and resource that entrepreneur with everything that we possibly can to get as closest to that outcome as possible. And I think that's a fairer way of setting expectations with entrepreneurs.
I like that some of your examples are really fit to HL Ventures and a playbook you're setting because they are early stage, like pre-seed or seed entrepreneurs. They are just getting a concept. They need to reach to customers. They need to test it. And you're explaining them how to write an email, how to react to a not yet. And so I think this playbook is clearly specific to the stage you're investing. And maybe this is one of the things which I wanted to ask you from your background when you worked at what became Company Ventures in late stage. So you have a sense of what a late stage company looks like. Now you're invested early stage, but knowing the trajectory and one of the end point, how much of that is helping you to build that playbook?
That's a wonderful question, and I will note that HL Ventures invests at Series A and B, and our entire platform is available to our companies at Series A and B as well. There, in fact, the need to talk to us does not disappear at Series A and B. The types of questions, as you aptly mentioned, certainly change. They change into bigger numbers, bigger fundraising strategies, board relationships, navigating complex cap table, navigating executive salaries. But those experiences, both through company ventures and the experiences that I have now at HL Ventures, help us shape these playbooks over time because there's definitely repeated things that happen across the portfolio, although, of course, every company is unique in its own way, that help us get back to the drawing board and say, okay, what it is that we know to do very well. We know very well how to help someone structure a fundraising strategy. We know very well that cap tables are very important. We'll build more resources around that. We know that having co-investors in the network is really important, and it gets even more important as we go up in stages and raise more capital. Board relationships become critical. How do we navigate and how do we ensure that we have a good playbook around leading a wonderful board meeting or writing a great investor update? So all of these experiences from company ventures and HL now over these 4 years have helped us and me as a platform professional shape all these playbooks and support systems and resources for sure.
Now, let's talk about something which is maybe very concrete, especially for the audience, is KPIs. How do you measure success and how do you track it over time?
How do we measure success of platform? That's a very complex question. And I think that that is where a lot of my colleagues, including myself, oftentimes find ourselves in a conundrum. Um, and this actually goes back to one of the workflows that I gave you an example of, for example, introductions.
Hmm.
How do you measure a KPI of a business development sprint? You measure it not in the number of introductions you've made. That could be a KPI, but it's sort of self-serving and not helpful. But you can say that you've in fact made an impact by a couple of introductions leading to a great contract or a
Hmm.
pilot or perhaps an insightful conversation even that changed the trajectory of the go-to-market strategy the company had. So measuring all those things and keeping track of every introduction makes no sense to me. I think it's too tactical, too in the weeds, and self-serving for the person in the platform role. But these bigger outcomes, when it leads to breakthroughs, when it leads to a high NPS score in the community, we do annual NPS score measurements for our community. That is when you can really see the impact of platform. But a lot of it is qualitative.
Hmm.
And that's why it's so difficult to share with the leadership in the firm and really say, well, we've made this many introductions and it led to, a wonderful outcome somewhere down the line. I think a lot of it is qualitative, but one of the KPIs that I found to be impactful is the NPS score. How happy is the community with your effort? Would they recommend your support, your firm to other entrepreneurs if they had the chance, if somebody asked them? I know it's a little bit wishy-washy, perhaps, especially in the world of venture capital, where it's all numbers and hard numbers, but the NPS scoring has been critical to us. Everything else, how many events did we hold during the week? How many people showed up? I think those are metrics that are negligible in the grand scheme of things. Platform has that unfortunate angle where you have to show up with real numbers, and you can't always rely on those numbers. What I do recommend to colleagues in the industry, or anyone who's inspired by this conversation and wanted to get into platforms somewhere down the line, um, I recommend creating pillars of sorts or categories for which one is responsible in platform, whether you're covering just a specific category like marketing and comms, or you're responsible for the whole suite, sort of full stack of platform, and figuring out where you spend the majority of your time. For example, on my end, I spend a lot of time in talent, people, compensation, especially recently, which is very interesting to me. I was never a people operations person. I don't come from that world, but I've built that experience over time alongside wonderful search partners and people who've given me insights. I spend a lot of time on brand and marketing and communications for sort of overseeing that department and making sure that I'm always on the lookout for how we're being presented and partnered with the PR firm that we're working with. I spend a lot of time, obviously, on daily active engagement with our portfolio companies. So, what could I, as a professional, make out of those categories and make out of the impact that I make on each of those categories? Where have I been spending most of the time? And then the NPS score is really important. Mapping across other things is perhaps less helpful. That was a lengthy response, but it's sort of a work in progress, even in my mind.
No, I think it's. I'll take 3 points you made. I think the first one is on the pillars, and I think that's a really good advice. At TDK Ventures, if I look at our platform team, of course, we have the engagement team linking to TDK and TDK group of companies so that you know who to reach out to. We have a pillar for HR, a pillar for marketing, a pillar for non-dilutive financing and debt, a pillar for ecosystem to find marquee customers. So I think your advice on pillar is very important. You need to specialize within the platform as well. The second one, I think, which is a good tip, is number of introduction. I think it's not just self-serving, it's actually quite damaging if you measure number of introductions, because then you could bombard the entrepreneurs with introductions that they don't need and they don't want. So I think it should be result driven versus quantity of introductions, which could actually be more detrimental for the entrepreneurs you're trying to serve. And the last one, which is really cool, because I didn't plant it for you, so you didn't know about this, but last month I had an article about using Net Promoter Score for venture capital published in Harvard Business Review. So I'm definitively a practitioner, but also a strong believer on the value of deploying NPS. And the key difference between a satisfaction survey and Net Promoter Score is that it's not about whether they are happy or not. It's whether they got enough value that they would recommend you to other entrepreneurs. And that tells you a lot about the value you bring. So maybe if I can ask you from this NPS survey, what kind of surprises did you get from doing this survey?
First of all, always a big fan of anyone who likes the NPS framework, so thank you for that. Um, you know, I think every time that I look at the NPS scores, it drives my interest to make them even higher. It gets me inspired to do more. Thankfully, what we do outside of just the NPS score, we have a questionnaire that we send to our companies where we ask them in a detailed way to give us some examples anonymously about where we've been most helpful, where they would like a little bit more help, which members of the community have been most helpful to them throughout the year, so on and so forth. So we're able to gather a little bit more granular data around that. So by taking that NPS score and taking that information that I received from the survey, I'm able to get an insight into what we could improve, where we could double down, where we could maybe scale something down because it's less helpful or clearly not asked for enough. The surprises is that I find that um, you know, founders need to use resources even more.
Hmm.
You know, it's sometimes not very obvious to entrepreneurs, or sometimes they're so busy that they can't necessarily appeal to every resource. But it's my job ultimately to point them to those resources. So my effort from these surveys is always to take that and say, oh, I didn't realize that it wasn't obvious that this resource was available to you. How
Yep.
do I make sure that I point that to you next time, and that you know that it's there? But maybe I reach out proactively. Thankfully, because we have weekly conversations with our founders, it's easier to do that and catch that, as opposed to platform interactions, which are sporadic, right? Or that are more tailored to a specific effort that someone's making. We're in contact with entrepreneurs a lot. And so it's easier for them to come to me for things and for me to ask, hey, did you know that we had this? Because it's right there and I can help you get to that resource faster. But even then, I sometimes look at the things that we have around us and there's gold everywhere, just absolute wonderful things. And I
Hmm.
think that if founders had more time, which they never do, they should appeal to that more so that they can again over resource themselves. But if they can't, we're always there to point them to whatever's available to them. So no big surprises in the surveys, just because we stand so close to our founders. But what motivates me in those surveys and those results is to always go an extra mile. And it can become a thing of, beating yourself up over, oh, why didn't I think of that? Why I didn't think of that? But I have time and resources to build it out, and it's one of my favorite things to do. It's what I wake up everything for every morning for. So it's only a pleasure to read these responses, and self-servingly. And I will say that reading compliments, given to our experts, compliments to our mentors, advisors, thanks for the introductions. That's a thing that warms my heart.
Yeah. No, I when we get NPS responses and our questions are open, and people proactively, without being triggered, mention some team members, it feels so good because it really means they went beyond what was expected. So I totally
Yeah.
get that. I think there is
Yeah.
something very unique you do at HL Ventures, which is this weekly touch point. And what's interesting is I know many VC firms where they will spend a lot of time when the company does extremely well, or they will spend a lot of time when the company doesn't do well. But sometimes some portfolio companies will just not get a lot of touch points. But here you're doing weekly for every portfolio companies. Can you share maybe some best practices and maybe some tips to make these weekly touch points really impactful?
Yes. Well, one, thank you for noticing that and acknowledging that. Yes, I think that generally HL does things a little bit differently, starting from our diligence process and all the way into our engagement with the portfolio companies, because we have seen a lot of this behavior happen in the venture ecosystem. And so, to address it and counter it with a different model, we created this weekly touch point and made sure that we are actively listening to founders. The point is not to be in their way. The point is to ensure that we're actively listening to what's happening. The call is always theirs. Um, there can be an agenda. It can be agenda-less. It's not on the entrepreneur to bring us an agenda. It's our job to make it easiest for them to speak to us, whichever the mode of communication might be, and then build rapport over time. This is really important because there's a difference between a monthly or a quarterly update to your investors, which is a report out, and a check-in with a company that you're working with because you want to make sure that you can be helpful, that you're asking the right questions, right? And so
Mm.
there will be companies that are working on their brand strategy, for example, and we will have resources for them and answers for them. And sometimes they will bring this up. Other times we will casually bring up something that we've noticed on the website or in the strategy that they're pursuing. But it's not so much about the format of the call, Nicola. It's more about what is it that we do with the information that we receive and how do we action that information. And so I mentioned before that we've built a proprietary system that holds all of our sort of information and action items for the team throughout the week. It's how we action these items and do we actually deliver on the action items week to week is what builds the rapport with the entrepreneurs and what builds the trust and what brings them back the next week and the following to share more and more with us. And it takes a little bit of time because oftentimes entrepreneurs, whether they're weathered entrepreneurs or brand new, when they join the portfolio, they've had the wish list call. They're kind of bought into the entire, strategy. But I think it's really hard to believe that that an investor will sit across from you on Zoom or over the phone and will actually talk about the action items and then working on the action items and actually delivering on the stuff that they promised. And so it's both being very methodical. Again, it goes back to the architecture
Yeah.
and the strategy, and then delivering on the promise or setting the right expectation around certain workflows. And so I think good intentions is one thing, and being empathetic to the entrepreneur is one thing, but actually showing up on the call, ensuring that we're listening, ensuring that the entrepreneur is supported, and then asking the right question and actioning on the items that we promise to deliver on is very important. We the entrepreneur is still running their company. They're still running the show. We're just
Yeah.
there for support and then get out of the way as much as possible, not ever be in their way.
I think one thing which is interesting about this weekly touch point is I think it automatically creates a discipline in your team to make sure that you're tracking of the actions because you know you're going to meet them the week after and the week after. And so I feel like it's nearly creating the discipline automatically versus I promise to do something, but then only 3 weeks later I come back to you. So I think that there is something quite special about this cadence.
Absolutely, and it always comes from the top, right? We have a team that's always been very organized, uh, very meticulous about, very diligent, very detail oriented. When I joined the team, I knew I was the same type of person. It was very easy to create a cadence that makes sense to our personalities, to our characters, right? Because when we want to, when we wake up in the morning, all we want to do is we want to work for our companies. And so it's very
Mm-hmm.
natural that we built a process around that to incorporate that into our day to day.
I like I like the way you say work for our companies because I can see you really see the entrepreneurs as your customers, and that's where the NPS methodology makes total sense as well.
Yeah.
Now, I want to go back to the no silo concept, which is so important. And you were promoted into the investment committee of HL Ventures. So, can you talk about the value of having someone in the platform team as part of the IC and what special value you bring as part of the platform team?
Yeah, absolutely. I was actually given an IC seat from day one of my role
Ah,
at
okay,
HL.
even better.
Even better. And, that solidified for me HL's commitment to the seriousness and the strategy of platform work. In fact, the management team was the one that came up with the concept of active engagement with companies. I was already on fertile ground, so to speak. I didn't invent HL's platform; it existed conceptually for a long, long time, way before me. Um, but what really made me believe that they were serious about it was the IC seat and the belief that the siloing is damaging to the team. I think that given that we're so value add driven at HL Ventures, having me on the IC allows this entire strategy to permeate our decision making process. I obviously participate in every IC meeting. We all make decisions together. We all, the investments team, the platform team, sit on our weekly meetings together, talking about the deal flow and what's happening in the portfolio. So by having a very open table discussion about these things across all functions of the firm, we're able to be more open with each other about sharing information, about ensuring that everybody on the team, on the investments team, understand what's happening inside. Then the platform team understands what types of deals are coming in as we look at them. And so that just allows for more transparency. Now, what happens when a platform team member is on the investment committee, it also promotes the idea that platform is in fact as valuable as the investments role. And I think, again, going back to professionalizing platform, that's very important. I have no doubt that there are lots of people in platform roles who are thinking about switching away from the platform role and going on the investment side because there's a possibility of an upside and serious upside once you join the investments team and grow up in that category and climb the ladder in that category. It's not always a straightforward platform. So HL, in a lot of ways, set the precedent with that appointment for the rest of the industry, and we want to pave the way for more professionals in my category to be decision makers and to have a real stake in the businesses that we support, because quite a bit of work happens post investment, and so I believe that it's very natural to bring that portfolio knowledge back into diligence, back into investment decisions. Understanding what happens after investment oftentimes informs the decision making when you're looking at a company and when you're evaluating it for investment.
Yeah.
What are the gaps on the team? What does spending money look like in the next 6 to 12 months? What does runway look like? What is their go-to-market strategy? What are their hiring plans? Who else is on the cap table? How can we ensure that we understand this company holistically? And I think bringing more diverse perspectives on the IC is so critical.
I think part of the professionalization and the value add is a good argument why the platform team should also qualify for carry, because they do influence the outcome that could then bring back even better carry. I want to take the last question for you, which is, I think the audience, especially the entrepreneurs who are going to watch this interview, are going to be like, okay, I want to talk to HL Ventures. It clearly can help my company, especially early stage. Can you share a little bit about what type of entrepreneurs you're looking for and maybe what topics you're especially interested in? So at least they have a sense of, okay, we
Of
fit
course.
HL Ventures, we want to come to them.
Of course. So HL Ventures is a fund that invests in ventures that do good for the society and or environment with a strong preference for diversely founded teams. We're a generalist investor, so we are investors in SaaS companies, we're investors in commerce, fintech, material science. But at the core, the venture needs to be doing something good for the planet and or society. And if it's diversely founded, underrepresented, even better, fits our thesis. So HL Ventures invests through our studio vehicle. We take in companies as early as back of a napkin ideas and all the way up to seed. And our family of funds called City Rock Ventures invests in Series A and B companies. And so there are multiple entry points into HL. You can talk to us as early as idea stage or your seed round, where we put in about $100,000. It's a flat check. Or you can come to us at Series A and B and talk to us then. So there's no necessity to go through the studio, but of course, if you go through the studio, there's a little bit more knowledge and relationship building throughout that time. And we're also able to add value at earlier stages quite prominently. HL Ventures is based in New York City. We invest across the United States. And yeah, we're really looking forward to chatting with more entrepreneurs. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Galina. I think you've made a very strong point about platform team, but also having the intention behind to make the platform team a differentiation and making sure it's focused on the entrepreneurs, what they need at the right time. Thank you so much, Galina.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Nicolas.